For over a decade, Bethesda basically couldn't miss. Sure, they had bugs, NPCs occasionally launched themselves into orbit, and sure, you'd walk into a room and find someone's head spinning like a washing machine, but people didn't really care because Bethesda games had something that almost no other developer could replicate. They had magic. Not literal magic, although Skyrim obviously had plenty of that. I'm talking about that feeling. That feeling when you leave the vault in Fallout 3, that feeling when you step out of Helgen in Skyrim, that feeling when you emerge from Vault 111 in Fallout 4 and see a destroyed Boston stretching across the horizon. That feeling where the game basically says, go on then, see what's out there. And somehow every single direction looked interesting. Every hill, cave, building, road, random landmark, you always felt like there was something waiting for you. Then Starfield came out, the game Bethesda had spent nearly a decade building. The game Todd Howard called the culmination of everything they'd learned, the first new Bethesda universe in 25 years. Their biggest budget, their biggest ambition, their biggest marketing push, and somehow the most forgettable game they've ever made. Not their worst game. That's an important distinction. Starfield isn't terrible. It's actually competent in many areas. The gunplay is decent, the visuals can be stunning, the shipbuilding is pretty fantastic, the faction quests are often enjoyable, but that's almost what makes the failure more fascinating. Because Starfield isn't a disaster, it's something much worse. It's unfortunately boring. And for a Bethesda game, that is basically the cardinal sin. Because Skyrim wasn't great because it had amazing combat, Fallout 4 wasn't great because it had revolutionary RPG mechanics, people loved those games because they were impossible to stop playing. Starfield somehow lost that, and today I want to talk about why. Because I think Starfield would expose a problem that's been growing inside Bethesda for years, a problem that Skyrim and Fallout 4 managed to hide, but Starfield couldn't. The elephant in the room has to be the exploration, the single greatest strength Bethesda ever had, and somehow the thing Starfield completely misunderstood. Think about Skyrim, you're walking to Whiterun, simple objective, right? Then suddenly you see a cave, so you investigate. Inside the cave you find a necromancer, and the necromancer has a note. The note points towards another location. That location starts a quest. The quest leads to a dungeon. The dungeon rewards a unique weapon. 3 hours later, you've completely forgotten what you originally intended to do. That's the Bethesda magic. Organic discovery, player curiosity, natural exploration. Now compare that to Starfield. You open a menu, click a planet, watch a loading screen, watch another loading screen, land, walk for 5 minutes, find an abandoned research facility, fight pirates, loot a facility, leave, land on another planet, find the exact same facility with the exact same layout, the exact same enemies, the exact same rooms, the exact same loot placements, the exact same everything. And suddenly the illusion shatters because exploration stops being discovery and starts becoming content consumption. You're not uncovering a world, you're consuming generated assets. There's the huge difference. People underestimate how important handcrafted design is. Skyrim had one map, one giant map. Every mountain, every village, every ruin, every cave placed deliberately. Designed intentionally. Bethesda knew exactly what players might see from every angle. They could control curiosity, they could guide attention, they could create memorable moments. Remember seeing Bleak Falls Barrow from miles away. Remember seeing the throat of the world. Remember discovering Blackreach. Those moments exist because someone designed them. Someone carefully built them. And Starfield's 1,000 planets sound impressive on a marketing slide, but in practice it's quantity over quality. 1,000 planets means Bethesda couldn't handcraft most of them, and it shows. Let's talk about perhaps the most controversial aspect of Starfield, space, or rather the lack of it. When Starfield was first announced, many people imagined something closer to Skyrim in space. Not necessarily No Man's Sky, not necessarily Elite Dangerous, but something that captured the fantasy of being a space explorer. Instead, space often feels like a menu system. Think about how much time you spent actually traveling through space, not loading or fast traveling or actually traveling. Very little. You open menus, click destinations, watch animations, watch loading screens, appear somewhere else, and after a while the illusion breaks because you're not exploring space, you're teleporting around it. The universe starts feeling smaller and smaller despite technically being larger. That's an incredible achievement, and not in a good way. This is where Fallout 4 deserves more credit than it often gets, because Fallout 4 understood momentum. Every location connected naturally, every road led somewhere, and every distraction flowed into another distraction. You were constantly moving, constantly discovering, constantly engaged. Starfield interrupts itself every few minutes. Open map, select system, fast travel, loading screen, land, loading screen, enter building, loading screen, leave building, loading screen, travel again, loading screen. It's death by 1,000 cuts. None of these interruptions seem massive individually. Together they destroy immersion. I think Starfield fell into the same trap that many modern games do. The obsession with scale. Developers keep asking, how can we make the world bigger? When they should be asking, how can we make the world better? Nobody wanted 1,000 planets. Nobody. Most players would have happily taken 10 incredibly detailed solar systems, or 5, or even 1. Imagine if every planet had Skyrim level density. Imagine if every city felt alive. Imagine if exploration consistently rewarded curiosity. Instead, we got a galaxy that's a mile wide and an inch deep. Ask somebody about Skyrim. They'll mention Whiterun, Solitude, Blackreach, High Hrothgar, Riften, the College of Winterhold, the Dark Brotherhood Sanctuary. Ask somebody about Fallout 4. You get Diamond City, Good Neighbor, the Glowing Sea, Vault 81, the Institute, and now ask someone about Starfield. Most people pause. And that's a problem. A huge damn problem, because memorable locations create attachment. Attachment creates nostalgia, and nostalgia creates longevity. Starfield has cities, but very few iconic places. Very few unforgettable moments. Very few locations burned into gaming history. Another issue, Bethesda's RPG system has been getting simpler for years. Skyrim simplified Oblivion. Fallout 4 simplified Fallout 3. Starfield continues the trend. Now, simplicity isn't automatically bad, but eventually you remove enough complexity that choices stop feeling meaningful. Character builds become less distinct, role-playing becomes weaker, and player identity becomes blurrier, and Starfield often feels trapped between two audiences. It's not deep enough for hardcore RPG fans, but it's also not streamlined enough for action-adventure players. It sits awkwardly in the middle. Skyrim released in 2011, Fallout 4 released in 2015. The industry was different. Bethesda's formula felt unique, but since then, everybody improved. Open worlds improved, RPGs, quest design, narrative design, environmental storytelling improved. Bethesda stayed surprisingly static, while studios like CDPR and Larian, and even From Software, kept evolving. Bethesda largely kept making Bethesda games. Starfield exposed that stagnation. Here's the thing, people often debate whether Skyrim is actually a great RPG. And honestly, that's missing the point. Skyrim's genius wasn't its RPG system, it was freedom. Pure freedom. See mountain, climb mountain, see cave, enter cave. See a city, visit a city, you see a dragon, you fight dragon. Everything felt immediate, everything felt connected, everything felt possible. Starfield constantly places layers between the player and the experience. Menus, maps, fast travel, loading, navigation systems. It turns freedom into administration. Starfield also suffered from impossible expectations. Let's be honest, people waited years for this game, nearly a decade. Fans expected Bethesda's next Skyrim, their next Fallout 3, their next industry-defining masterpiece. Instead, they got a good game, and sometimes being good is the worst thing you can be when everyone else expected greatness, because nobody talks about good games 10 years later. People talk about masterpieces and they talk about disasters. Starfield landed awkwardly in between. Now, some people say mods will fix it. Well, maybe, but Bethesda games have already relied heavily on modders, but that's also part of the problem. At some point, Bethesda has to stop relying on fans to finish the experience. Skyrim mods expanded greatness. They didn't create it. The foundation was already incredible. Starfield's foundation is shakier. Mods can improve systems, add content, and fix problems, but they can't fundamentally redesign the entire structure of exploration. I think the hardest truth Bethesda fans need to accept is Starfield may simply not have been built around the right idea. Not every fantasy works as a Bethesda game. Bethesda thrives on dense worlds, compact exploration, constant discovery. Space naturally spreads things apart. Distance becomes a feature, isolation becomes a feature, procedural generation becomes necessary, and those strengths often clash directly with Bethesda's traditional formula. It's like trying to force a square peg into a round hole. Ironically, Starfield's failure makes me more excited for The Elder Scrolls 6, because Bethesda finally received a wake-up call. They now know players don't care about scale for the sake of scale. They know exploration still matters more than size. They know handcrafted content beats procedural content. They know immersion matters. Most importantly, they know Skyrim's magic wasn't an accident. It was a result of specific design choices. Choices Starfield abandoned. When people compare Starfield to Skyrim and Fallout 4, they're often comparing content, quests, weapons, graphics, and systems, but I think that's the wrong comparison. The real difference is feeling. Skyrim feels like an adventure. Fallout 4 feels like a journey. Starfield feels like a checklist, and that's why it failed. Not because it's bad, not because it's broken, or not because Bethesda suddenly forgot how to make games, but it failed because it forgot what made Bethesda special in the first place. It's the curiosity, discovery, and wonder. That magical feeling of picking a random direction and finding something unforgettable. Skyrim understood that. Fallout 4 understood that. Starfield did not. And until Bethesda remembers that lesson, the words Skyrim in space will remain one of gaming's greatest missed opportunities, because Starfield had the budget, the technology, the marketing, the development time, hype, and talent. Everything necessary to become Bethesda's next masterpiece. Everything except the one thing that actually mattered. The magic. And that's why years later, people are still happily losing themselves in Skyrim, still replaying Fallout 4, and still discovering new stories, while Starfield is already becoming a footnote